Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. This is a little bit meta. It's a webinar on webinars. Hopefully, we will give you a little bit of new or extended information on how to deliver webinars that are more engaging, easier to set up and plan. We're going to give you our whole routine, our whole process that our team uses to plan, present, and promote our webinars and even follow up. So I'm going to be sharing that full range of steps that we take. So the first thing I want to do is to orient you to your little GoToWebinar panel and the little place that you can type. I would love to know if you are working from your home or are you working from your office. I'm actually in my office for the first time since March 2nd. There are literal cobwebs connecting my computer to the desk. It's a little bit creepy. My calendar says February 2020 on it. And it's very surreal to be here, but it was the right choice for internet stability to present. So I have Joe is doing both. We have Jason, Monty, Jody, Miles, Michael all at home. We have Luke in the office. So yeah, Ross is in the office. So a lot of folks still at home. Katie is in her home office. Martin at home, Doug's still at home. Thank you guys. So we'll be asking you to share a couple times here in the little chat question box. And that's also where you can submit questions for me to answer at the end of the presentation. I have actually compiled all the questions that were submitted in advance, and I'll be answering those first. And so you'll have plenty of time to be thinking of what follow-ups that you want to ask. So we're here today because webinars can solve some of your problems. And maybe in this year, they solved more of the problems that we didn't realize we were going to have. And I really want to make it clear that there's a specific role that they play, but even post-pandemic, I don't think that anyone would say that they can solve all the problems. You cannot replace face-to-face communication and the value of working closely with someone, particularly when you get to more technical topics that need hands-on demos, that sometimes math topics that really require that support to say, here's maybe where you're going wrong. But they can solve some of our problems. And so webinars work, and we've used them for our program for so long. We're primarily an online program. Because they are convenient, a participant can attend from anywhere from their home, and that's what we've learned this year. It's so easy to be able to unite people from around the world on one screen to learn something new. They're, of course, incredibly cost-effective compared to doing an in-person event. An in-person event has major expenses both for the organization hosting that event and of course travel expenses for those attending the event. So when you bring up dollar signs, it tends to be a win-win for everyone all around. And of course they allow you to extend your reach. There's some folks that have been working from home for a long time. There's others that are in more remote locations, and web-based training, when it first started, really changed the game to allow folks from all over to be able to access this information in a new way. And of course, now I heard that we've accelerated the pace of technology adoption by, we did 5 years and 5 months this year. And so, of course, web-based training is going to continue to be an important role, and people are going to be asking new questions about what type of training needs to be in person and what type of training is most effective in delivery and, of course, cost-effective to be able to deliver it online. So here's what you're going to learn today. I'm going to start with what you're not going to learn today. You're not going to learn how to pick a topic, because I'm going to assume that you have an idea of what your audience needs to learn. We have folks from the drinking water world as well as the public health world here, and of course many of those that overlap. But you probably have an idea of some of the training that you need to do in your professional position. But what we're going to focus on is what you need to do before your event to get ready, and that's where actually most of the work happens. What you can do during the event to make it more interesting, to make it more fun, to make it just not crazy boring, because you want your audience to not only just have a pleasant experience, but to be able to retain the information. And what are the things that you need to do after the event, because it doesn't end when everyone signs off. So I've mentioned our programs, but we run both wateroperator.org and privatewellclass.org. Some of you signed up for one or the other, and I know some of you are familiar with both of the things we do. We have done webinars in both programs for a very, very long time, but I would say Private Well Class is kind of the more mature program, and so you'll see several examples throughout this presentation of what we do for Private Well Class. And we really have the full robust system for that program. Okay, so in your chat box again, will you start or continue delivering webinars in 2021? I want to know more about kind of where you're at and what you're thinking about and what brought you to signing up for this webinar. We actually had 100 more registrations just in the last 24 hours, so I want to welcome all of you who just jumped on with us. We have yes, many, probably, we will be, yes. Yes, they're going to plan to continue for the Illinois section, plan for the foreseeable future. Elizabeth's going to start. Miles says probably. So Carrie's also going to start next year. Yes, many planned in 2021. So it sounds like we also maybe have different experience levels here too. So those folks that are just wanting to get their program going, or maybe even just one training that you want to get going, and those who will be continuing to do these ongoing. All right, so when this original presentation was delivered several years ago at a conference, and you saw at the beginning that Katie Buckley, who's my moderator today, is a co-author on this, because we wanted to share all the planning that goes into doing a webinar. And we've leveraged, my experience for 15 years now in putting this together and feeling like we have a repeatable system. And so when you have a repeatable system, it doesn't overwhelm you. You don't feel intimidated because here's the list of things that we need to do to get ready for the webinar. But of course, the first time you do it, it will feel a little intimidating. Maria just said, I don't see a chat option here, only a question box. Sorry, yeah, we never quite know what it says. It says questions for everyone. But on our end, they're separated between chat and questions. So sorry about that. And so before the webinar, the most important thing to do is to map out, I should say out, not R, but map out tasks, assign roles, and maybe it's just a one-person show, but if you do have assistants, I recommend having a moderator on every webinar to make sure that your audio works, you're showing the right screen, and someone that can maybe do a little bit of troubleshooting with your participants, because there will always be comments coming in saying like, I can't hear you, and that's not something as the presenter that you can really deal with in the moment. So having a moderator at minimum is why a second person is needed, but they may not have any other role besides playing that moderator role. And then of course, setting deadlines so you're not scrambling at the very end, because it's really important. If you're going to do a webinar, you have to make sure you have attendees at that webinar. So you need to set deadlines of all the prep that you need to do going into that. So we've done this a couple different ways. This is the version we've done in Asana. So Asana is a project management tool. We actually currently use Trello now, but they operate pretty much exactly the same in terms of helping you organize information into checklists and repeatable templates. These are both free tools with paid upgrades. We use the free versions of both and have used them for a long time. But it's really helpful for listing out all the individual steps, and then even in some cases assigning those to specific people. But being able to have all the steps that it takes to do a webinar in one place allows you to then use that same system again and again, and even adjust it over time. Maybe you sent out emails 3 weeks before, and maybe next time you want to send out 2 days before instead. I mentioned that we had 100 people register at the last moment. We found our best success in making sure that we send a reminder very, very close to the webinar, because some individuals maybe aren't sure if they have time, but they know closer to that moment, well, I have time for tomorrow. I can go ahead and register for that. So we do send far in advance notices, but we also send one really close to the webinar as well. So you can see some of the examples here. Before the webinar, you want to, of course, set the date and time. You want to set it up in whatever software you're using, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You want to create a place where people can register. If you have to apply for CEUs from your state agency or from another credentialing body, you want to go ahead and do that. Sometimes there's a really specific deadline for that, so you need to make sure that you have an appropriate window of time to make sure you get a response. And of course, you want to, set up emails to anybody who's going to help you promote the webinar. Sometimes those need to be well far in advance as well. And what I'm going to tell you now is that for those of you who are watching live as well as watching in the replay, when we send out the recording of this, I will send you a copy of our full list, our full checklist of everything that we do in that email so that you can get a more in-depth sense of all the steps that we take. And so one of the things you saw there was creating a landing page. Now, if you require registration for your event, often they will give you a special link that they can go to. But even if you're not, maybe you're just using a Zoom link or some other direct access link and you're not requiring registration, you need to have a place where people can go to learn more about what they're going to get out of it, what's the date, are there any credits involved with it, who's the instructor. We have an example here of Steve, our instructor for private well class. And we found this really, really helpful because not only does it provide them the information that they need, it also helps to connect with that value you're providing back to your brand. If you're sending someone always to just a GoToWebinar link, it's a little bit more anonymous. Even though that orange button there goes to the GoToWebinar link, going here, they know, they get that sense, I'm going to private well class. This is the private well class training. This is what I'm going to get from that. So there's a lot of important value in that brand recognition and brand connection by having a landing page for the webinar, even if you're going to send them somewhere else to actually do the registration. And of course, we have to set up the technology. You're on GoToWebinar right now. We have used that for a long, long time. It's one of our favorite platforms because it is really reliable. It allows registration. There's a lot of reporting. We've had a lot of success with it, but of course it is not the only option. Zoom, a year ago, I don't know, maybe let's say this, let's just do a little mini poll here in your question box. 1 year ago, were you aware of Zoom? Yes or no? I'm so curious for this. No, no, yes, yes, no, yes, yes. Ooh, very mixed. I'm seeing more no's than yeses though. Maybe some aware of it but hadn't used it. So just to think about how much things have changed, which is of course an understatement, but a platform like Zoom has become a very reliable tool because it has that additional benefit of being able to see everyone's faces. So if you're trying to replace a 20, 30 person in-person training, and you want to be able to get those personal relationships, that personal connection with your students, something like Zoom is really, really valuable. Whereas, GoToWebinar here, obviously I'm just kind of a disembodied voice. Crowdcast is another interesting example. It's more of its own little platform, but they have really good streaming features and a really nice Q&A tool, which I think is a little bit better. I know Zoom Webinars has this tool, but regular just Zoom meetings does not, and of course GoToWebinar does not, but it's more of that kind of upvote system. So folks can submit questions and then other participants can up or downvote what they feel about that question. And as a presenter, that really helps you see what do most people want to hear about here. And sometimes if you get a lot of questions, you may not have time to answer all of them. So I have enjoyed Crowdcast for that interactive feature and really being able to know, okay, what are the top 2, 3, 4 questions that my audience most wants to hear me? WebEx and Adobe Connect used to be kind of the big dogs in this industry, and you haven't really heard a lot about them this year unless your organization already had a license with them. And this is just my personal opinion. I think that they are a little bit more complicated and cumbersome to set up, both from a host end as well as from a participant's end. And I think that's why they didn't see the same kind of blow up that say Zoom did this year. All right, so I am curious, have you used any technologies that we haven't mentioned? If you could enter that in your question box, I am super curious. I know we do have one question at the end about Google Meets. That's not something that I've actually used yet. Microsoft Teams, oh yeah, that's a great example as well. I had never used Microsoft Teams before this year, but for our inter-office communication, we've used that a lot. Good old Skype, yes, of course. Life Size, I have not heard of that one. Uber Conference. So yeah, there's a lot of course, the virtual conference world has exploded this year, and I just didn't really, we've been prepping for our own virtual conference for the private well class in May, and it's been so interesting to see how many different options there are. And of course, they all require you to go to a sales training with their people, and but there's so many different options. A free conference, another example, Discord channel. Wow, okay. We got some gamers on here as well. So a lot of different options. But I think I see Microsoft Teams as the most popular example here. Great. All right, so we're continuing before the webinar. You want to make sure you test your webinar setup. And again, this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have your moderator there to let you know, hey, your voice sounds crackly. You need to maybe jiggle your USB cable, or you need to try a different headset. You need to make sure that you understand for using a webcam, to make sure that it's pointing to the right webcam and that's all set up properly, and that you're displaying your presentation and sharing the right screen. And I would say this is even more important if you have guest panelists on your webinar. As folks get more and more savvy, I think this is less important, but for someone who's never presented on a webinar before, maybe you're bringing in 3 or 4 people from all around, it's really handy to do like a little trial run, 15, 30-minute session to make sure that everyone can log in, share their screen, they know about the transfer of controls, and allow them to answer any question or ask any questions about, what do I do if, or all that. So we've done a number of those over the years when we've had panel discussions. But testing is always important. Kate and I logged on here about 40 minutes before just to make sure, because my computer hadn't been turned on in 9 months and I was a little nervous, but we were able to get things going. But that's why testing is so important, because I could have ended up back at home trying to deliver this. Okay, so also before the webinar, you need to make sure that you're telling people about it. And this really goes for any type of event. And those of you who've done really any type of event, you know that you can't just post it on your website. You need to be really active about sending it out directly to people. So this includes getting others to post about it on their websites and their email newsletters. We have a great partnership with NEHA, and they've really helped us expand the reach of our private well events. This is our private well class newsletter. We have a partners newsletter for all professionals in the field who are interested in private drinking water issues. And so we make sure that all of our webinars go in there as well. We have long felt that email is one of the most effective and continues to be the most effective way of communicating, because the content is landing in someone's lap. And maybe they're not accessing it on the same day, but if you're consistent, you become a trusted person, and they're going to open your emails and be able to find out what they need. But people don't navigate to websites as much as they used to. They're kind of waiting for that information to come across your lap, which includes, of course, social media as well. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram to a certain degree. It just depends on your particular sector and where people are operating. We have several recorded webinars on our website, wateroperator.org, of social media webinars that I delivered earlier this year if you're interested in learning more about that topic. Oh, here's another example here from Twitter. So you can see these were all the exact same event promoted in multiple locations. So of course we had that landing page, and then we also made sure it was shared as many places as possible. And not only shared once, but shared multiple times so that it could reach, you know, an even broader audience. Okay, you also want to make sure that you're preparing any polls or evaluations. You know, today we've done more informal polling through that question box. I find this to be some of the most personal way to do that. I like seeing your names. I want to be able to, you know, associate your answers with your names just so that I can be here with you as a human. I guess that sounds a little woo-woo, but I think that if we're trying to replace that in-person connection, it's really, really important. You can also do, if you're on something like Zoom where you have a smaller group and folks are able to share their faces and unmute themselves, sharing audio responses is great too, just to be able to get that conversation going. And there's a really great question at the end of the presentation where I will dive a little bit deeper, because I know sometimes it can be a struggle, even in an in-person training, to get folks to talk. And I have a tip for that. But you want to make sure that you're, you know, kind of have an idea of what you're going to ask in advance. And in particular, if you want to do some sort of evaluation, or if that's required, if you are operating on grant funding, or you have some other reason for, you know, your business process, why you need an evaluation, you want to make sure you set those up in advance. I really like to use the same type of evaluations over time. It doesn't mean you can't improve it, but I find that makes it easier to compare the answers, to be able to say, well, this one had, you know, all these answers in one area, and this one had all these answers in another area. But if you're not asking the same questions, it makes it harder to compare those responses, to identify trends, and to be able to judge maybe one topic versus another. One of the important things, I think, is also to think through your ideal Q&A process. So if you're here, you know that after you register for the webinar, we immediately sent you to a Google form where you were able to ask a question. And so the top right here is what you saw, and then on our end, those all go into a spreadsheet for us. And we're able to see what questions are popping up again and again. So sometimes those even go directly into our presentation as additional content, particularly if it's something that we see a lot, and allows us to prep responses for those questions at the end of our presentation before we take live Q&A. This is also super beneficial for those maybe who registered and couldn't attend live, or just want to get the information and have a question they want answered. We try our best to answer as many questions as we can. But having questions submitted in advance has been so valuable for us to make sure that we're gearing our presentations to the content the audience wants, and to just have, you know, more things to talk about, and to make sure we're really serving our audience best. So that's been really, really helpful for us, and we highly recommend it and have shared the technique with many over the years. So one important reminder here before we go into the, you know, in the webinar section, is that in this portion and ongoing, we're sharing a lot of different things for you to try. But you don't have to change everything at once. You don't have to say, okay, well, we're going to finally do webinars right, or we're starting webinars for the first time, and here's all the things we need to do. You can pick just one thing to add and maybe do a little bit differently. You can pick a couple things, but don't feel like you have to do every single thing on this list to make your webinar successful. So this is the first time we've delivered this topic as a webinar. I mentioned it was an in-person presentation, a much shorter version a long time ago. And so, you know, I didn't do all the things on my list. I think I did a lot of them, but we didn't do all of them because this is a very iterative process. The more that you deliver a given topic, the more you'll refine it. You'll see what the audience is interested in, maybe what they're not as interested in. You'll see the questions they're asking, and you'll be able to see what people are interacting on, and you can keep refining the process from there to make it better. So I guarantee you the next time we deliver this, they'll be just a little bit more polished and a little bit more thorough. And so I wanted to share this slide because it can be a little intimidating to think, oh, well, we're not doing it well, and that's not the case at all. If you're showing up online and being willing to give of yourself as an instructor, you're there and you're doing it. And of course, we've all learned so much this year, but I just wanted to remind you, you don't have to make all the changes all at once. Okay, now this was the most common question in what we received in advance is how do you keep your audience engaged during the webinar and just not be boring? So you'll notice a couple things that I've done through the slides. You'll notice changes of colors, changes of slide orientation. That is, even if you do nothing else, that can be really helpful. Doing some sort of polls or interaction. I think the built-in polls are kind of the most anonymous. They can be really, really interesting sometimes. But any type of asking for feedback, even if it's not directly related to the presentation, maybe it's just tangential, is a way to get your audience talking and feel comfortable and feel connected to you as the instructor. And of course, you want to ask for those personal experiences. I've done this several times already to just really make people feel like you value their input and that they're contributing as participants to this classroom, even though it is virtual. Because of course, if we're all sitting in a room together having a training, there'd be lots of that chit chat. And of course, some of that happens over the lunch break and you get to learn more about different experiences. So the more that you can kind of build in that almost the casual aspect of it, I think the more likely you're going to be able to keep your audience engaged. Another example is using Google tools to facilitate different exercises. We do this 4-hour workshop for environmental health professionals on outreach best practices and one of our tools for conducting private well assessments. And we do this fun thing where we send everyone, and sometimes it's hundreds of people, into a single Google Doc and ask them to share their responses. So this example is how would you respond to the issue or the complaint of private well testing costs too much. And so it's so crazy to watch because you have all these people writing at the same time and folks trying not to jump on each other, but somehow it works out. And in the end, you have this so incredibly valuable document of examples and firsthand experiences. And it's been so fun and something that, we've tried to or have discussed implementing in other types of our activities as well, because it's just been really easy and just it's both crazy and fun, but super rewarding in the end. Including a worksheet or handout is one of the simplest ways that you can keep folks engaged. This is the one that I did for a social media webinar, and it's just a one-page so that you can kind of have a sense of your takeaways from the presentation. Having something for folks to maybe fill in the blanks can be handy as well. Like maybe there's some particular takeaway points, but you're missing a word or two when you put it in the handout. So they're kind of waiting to fill out, okay, what belongs in that blank here? Anything to just keep hands focused on the presentation as well, because we all know it can be so distracting to be on your computer. Maybe you I know there's at least one, if not dozens of you out there with the webinar, a little screen, and maybe you got your email on a big screen next to it. We know that happens, but the more that you can do to keep folks focused on the topic, even if they're doodling on this page, they're still there with you and focused on your presentation. We've already talked a little bit about the Q&A and kind of making sure that you're planning how you're going to handle it. But we've found that having this combination of prepared and live Q&A allows us to give more in-depth answers, particularly on some of these more technical issues that come up in our private well webinars, as well as being able to be reactive to the questions that are being asked live. And we often recommend, as a presenter, I tend to have the questions thing so I can see what's coming in, and I can see which ones that Katie's saving for later for me. But sometimes I'll just want to jump in and say, hey Chris, I know you had this question, I see it come in, I'm going to go ahead and answer it now, because it's most timely to just continue the conversation. So the more that you can kind of stay engaged with what's being asked and follow up on that, it tends to flow more easily, and you're going to reduce folks kind of dropping off at the end, like, well, I didn't have any questions anyway, so I'm just going to go. And of course, you want to make it visually interesting. I mentioned a couple different ways that we've done that already, but just to have fun visuals, there's a lot of kind of royalty-free Creative Commons images that are available out there that you can use. Pexels.com, Pexels.com is one of my favorite for finding completely free to use images. But anything that you can use to add curiosity to the page will help your participant, help your student pay attention, think, oh, well, what are they going to say about that? And kind of at the same token, I think that's my next slide, reducing the amount of text that you have on the page, because you want them to be paying attention to you. The slides should support that, should reinforce that, should help organize that information, but you don't want them reading your slides. You want them listening to you as the presenter, because whatever you say is going to be much more powerful and impactful and stick with them longer than what they read on the slide. One thing that I think is so fun, and I've not been able to do this yet in this professional setting, only in the other professional setting that I live in, which is the scrapbooking world. But we use breakout groups all the time, and this is a Zoom feature, and it allows you to put 3, 4, sometimes 5 or more people into a small room and have great conversations. This is a great icebreaker scenario. You as an instructor, we all go back to our childhood and think, oh, we're kind of scared of the teacher, even as adults. So when you can put peers together in a room, it kind of breaks the ice, it gets conversation flowing that allows you then to maybe get more from them later. So having breakout groups and giving them a specific task in that breakout room can be really, really handy and really engaging for the students and rewarding. Allows them to just discuss a little thing, maybe solve a problem, do like a case study, but it really creates a more fulfilling environment that's also easier to access, more introvert friendly, just helps get folks to open up, and they can do that in a small environment versus a huge group. So this is my favorite question. I want to know, what is the worst thing that has happened to you during a webinar? So I can't wait to see what examples. So make sure you put that in the questions box. And if you have other questions that you're ready to ask, go ahead and submit those as well. Lots of audio issues. Nobody can hear you as the speaker. Oh, I've definitely done that. I've given 10 minutes of presentation and realized I was on mute. Somebody got lost in their notes. Several people kind of just, sometimes your brain kind of locks up, that's for sure. My cat spilled coffee in my lap. That is pretty epic. 2 presenters arguing. I can see that happening, particularly if you have some sort of panel discussion. All kinds of internet issues. Oh, the entire platform goes down. We were in I think it was in June, I was delivering a social media webinar, and all the power went out for our entire block, our entire neighborhood. And Katie lives a neighborhood over, and all the power was out there too. And so we had to do the second half of the presentation the next day. All of my clerical staff were gone, and I was on a Teams meeting with a presenter, and everyone could see me. I had to answer the phone that kept ringing, and the presenter stopped and asked if I was trying to call into her. I had to explain that there was no one here to answer calls. Yeah, I know. I think that is a perfect 2020 example, even if this didn't happen in 2020, because we're all kind of juggling families and pets and everything while we're trying to do our jobs as well. But I think that when we're thinking about all these things are the worst things that happen, the more we experience them, and the more that we can show that we can do work even in this crazy scenario that we're in now, the less intimidating it'll be going forward, because we have all been through this. There will always be things that happen, but we can recover. Everyone is more forgiving. We can just say, hey, I goofed, or I'm sorry, and we move on, because we're all human, and that's that's kind of what world we're living in these days. And that's, we have goofs when we're doing in-person presentations too. Maybe you forgot your presentation, or you forgot the evaluation forms, or whatever physical thing you needed to bring. But we're all in this together, and I think hopefully after this year will have shown us that we can really do anything no matter what situation we're facing. So here's some of the I tried to summarize what I thought you might say, common host problems. We have had some crazy problems with trolls. So folks coming in, logging on for the sole purpose of filling our kind of back end Q&A box with just complete junk. I don't know if they're bots, but sometimes they'll kind of take what I'm saying and repeat it back, and you kick them out and they come back in, and we've had this happen several times, and it seems like their whole purpose is just to be disruptive. Accidentally muting yourself, reach an account limit. We're based at the University of Illinois, and we were at that point sharing a GoToWebinar account. And our most popular webinar every year is our webinar on Septic Systems 101. And that year, the folks who basically managed the account said, oh, well, we never have more than 100 people on our webinar, so we're going to change which plan we're on. We're going to downgrade. But they didn't tell us that. And GoToWebinar, really, you can set the threshold, but our threshold for registrants was like 5,000 or something. But when we went to deliver the webinar, only 100 people could get in, and we had more than 700 registered. And it was embarrassing, but that's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And it was because, some higher up outside of our control changed the account limit because they never deliver webinars that had that many people on them. Forgetting to share your screen or sharing the wrong screen. On-screen notifications. I think Windows these days loves to pop things up for us, and sometimes you can see somebody's trying to send you an email like your dog is loose or worse. Something little could pop up on your screen, so you want to make sure those are closed off. And of course, computer crashing because of internet issues, power outage. On the audience side, can't hear the audio is probably the most common that I've seen. Almost exclusively, it's an issue on their end. They can't quite figure it out. I love to make sure we record every single webinar, and so I try to over communicate that to say, if you can't come or you end up having problems, you need to leave, this will be recorded and we'll send it to you later. Over communicating that can help reassure your participants that they can get the information. They're not quite sure where to look on that GoToWebinar panel. Sometimes there's firewall issues. I feel like this is less common, especially this year when we've kind of had to open up some things in order to access these platforms. Slower bad internet connections, that can be really challenging sometimes. And also just simply the not following the directions that you provide. And we've all been in this scenario where you said what to do and how to do it, and some folks just don't read that and follow along. And of course, that can be a challenge sometimes. Okay, so let's transition now to after the webinar. As I said, it doesn't end when we close off. It ends much, much later. So the first thing you want to do is you want to compile all your statistics. Even if you don't have anyone who's asking you for this, it is so valuable to track that over time so you can see which webinars are your most popular. So you want to look for how many registered and then what proportion of those attended. We vary between 30 and 50% attendance. I've heard stats as low as maybe say 10 to 20% is what's expected. I think that's more of the case of when somebody's trying to sell you something in this more professional audience where we're delivering this free for you. It's more of that 30 to 50%. And then of course, if it's a webinar you paid for, I would expect attendance rates of greater than 50%. You want to look where the people came from. You want to make sure you have their contact information so you can add that to your mailing list and so you can continue to communicate with them about future webinars. You want to know, their affiliation, what organization are they from and how did you hear about us? Because kind of the location, affiliation, and how you heard about us can give you valuable information about who's talking about your webinar, who's sharing your webinar, and maybe even giving you new ideas of what other kind of side stakeholder groups are interested in this information. When we started the private well class, we didn't realize that the real estate profession was going to be so interested in this topic. And once we noticed that there was this group that was registering and sharing our information, we started to directly reach out to them to amplify that reach even further. Of course, if you can, you want to edit your webinar recording. So in our example with GoToWebinar, they actually give us an MP4 file. And in many cases, we can upload that as is to YouTube or wherever we want to share it. They even offer the ability to have that in the cloud. I'm aware that both GoToWebinar and Zoom have that ability to have those cloud recordings for your participants. But if there is maybe kind of some excess at the beginning or there was a big goof in the middle, you can use video editing software to trim some of that out, or even in the case of our social media webinar that had to be done over 2 days, we spliced that together into one final video that we could share. Camtasia on a PC and ScreenFlow on a Mac, they're actually designed for screen capture presentations, like if you're going to do a little demo of how to navigate a website. But they're very, very simple video editing programs, much easier to use than something, say like Adobe Premiere or things that professionals use to edit video. So there's a lot of options these days. And of course, you can even edit some of these things on your phone. Adobe Rush, I believe it's free. I'm not sure for 100%, but there's so many tools that you can use to be able to quickly trim up videos. Even in YouTube, you can do very, very basic trimming edits if you need to be able to cut something out or trim off a beginning or an end. So a lot of options there, but you want to make sure you're presenting yourself in the best light, and anything you can do to put that little extra polish, I think, is worth the effort. And then, of course, once you have this recording, you want to share it in multiple places. So we upload all of our webinars to YouTube. We also have some kind of non-webinar, things that weren't recorded live, pre-recorded videos, and we found a lot of reach in that because YouTube is basically the #2 search engine. People are looking for information about certain topics on YouTube. So we always recommend sharing your videos there. We also post it to our website. We embed it directly in the website so they can watch it there, and including, information on what they're going to get from that. And then when we send out an email, we make sure that we always send it to the people who registered, and then we encourage them to register for the next webinar as well. And then in our next newsletter, we'll say, hey, here's the recording and here's our next webinar. So we always make sure we're just really being redundant to make sure that not only the idea of attending the webinar, but the recording after the webinar is accessible to as many as possible. And then of course, here we have social media as well. So did you miss last month's webinar? Here's where you can see that recording. And then kind of going back here to questions, you'll notice that the questions part was in each section. The preparation in advance, the during, and of course the after, because this gives you so much information about what your audience wants, and the more that you can do to give them those answers and help them know where to find those answers, the more capable they are. They have those answers, and then you also know what other people might want so that you can basically give those answers to them in advance. So we've taken the questions that have been submitted, and we even have an FAQ, which I think we're relaunching in early 2021, that has some of the most common questions. I believe this one actually is in a blog post, but we've taken some of the most common questions that folks have asked and provided answers that we can always refer to. You know, it hasn't happened today, but let's just say somebody had asked, what should I sample for? Katie could even send directly this blog post in the chat box to say, here's a blog post answering this question for you. It doesn't mean I wouldn't also mention it live, but it can help you as an organization get the right information to the person on a timely basis. And then if you're in a situation where, and I'm assuming most of the people here today are interested in some sort of certification, but if you can provide a certificate, it often helps those who are looking for maintaining their license. The model that we use is that we apply for pre-approval in Illinois and with NEHA, and for our webinars, we don't have pre-approval elsewhere, but we do provide a certificate to those who we've shown through our all of our analytics showed that you attended live. And we do this because many states will accept that as proof of attendance if we can give you a certificate. I know that only a portion of you here are going to be in that same situation where you're dealing with a fully national audience and dealing with multiple certification bodies. So at minimum, you should be talking to the various providers in your state. And sometimes, though, even those in multiple industries, pay attention to who's attending your trainings. It may be multiple different types of certifications. You know, we've been asked to get pre-approval for engineers in Illinois, and we said, well, we don't have, you know, we don't have that many PEs wanting credit, so we're not going to take that step, but we're more than happy to provide you a certificate. So this actually goes a little bit in planning as well to think about what you're going to do, but making sure that you're providing those afterwards is a really big portion of what we do afterwards. We have folks send us an email to info@wateroperator.org, and this goes to all of you here today as well. If you need a certificate, you just send an email to info@wateroperator.org or reply to any of the emails that we send you, and we'll make sure that you get a certificate for attending today. We aren't able to provide certificates to those who watch this in a recording, however, because we can't prove that you did it. I mean, we believe you personally, but we don't have the stats and the data to show that you did. All right, so this is your chance to share more questions that you have for us, and I will jump into some of the questions that were already submitted. Okay. So what is the best way to ensure your audience stays engaged with the content? And I've shared a ton of examples with this already, but I wanted to kind of elaborate and say that I think sometimes you need to under-deliver. And it doesn't mean, you know, set your standards low. Often there's certain things that you need to cover, but there's always ways to go too deep. And I think that's sometimes where audiences can glaze over and get bored, is when you go beyond what you need to do. I think if you focus on sharing the baseline knowledge and where they can go deeper, what are the essential resources? If you need to know this particular skill, where can you go deeper? I think that can really help. Anything you can do to connect ideas, to share, you know, frameworks, bullet points. But if you focus on what is the essential and delivering that effectively, and even through some repetition in your presentation, you're going to see more engagement than if you try to fire hose your audience with every single less detail. Because there's always ways to find more of the information, and your job as the presenter is to give them, you know, at the most basic, to give them the knowledge of what to Google for later. Once you know more of that vocabulary, you know the gist of it, you can look up more, but you have to have that foundation to start with. And I think in webinar presentations, that's the most effective thing that you can communicate. All right, I love this one. What is the best way to get folks to actually respond verbally to a question? It's always been a struggle live to get audience interaction, almost impossible online. I hate talking to myself. And my biggest advice for here is what I've done a little bit today, is that I want you to share your personal examples. even the most introvertiest of introverts love talking about themselves because that's what we're most confident about. So the more that you can break the ice with questions that are personal, even just, you know, do you drink coffee? Sometimes it can be really simple questions, but then, you know, foster camaraderie. If you can do those breakout groups, that can really help because it gets the peers talking to each other and just increases that comfort level. But really just making it personal is the best advice I have. Can you touch on best practices for longer virtual events like conferences? So we're doing our first virtual conference this coming May. I've attended several so far. It's been really interesting. So I have a couple observations. One is that I think and I'm seeing this kind of increasingly as time goes on, to consider some sort of flipped classroom model. And what that looks like is sharing some of the more presentation content to be consumed on your own and in advance, with the expectation that you do consume it in advance, and then having the opportunity to ask questions of that presenter live. Sometimes this looks like having the presenter just record the presentation and then being there for Q&A while it's presented live. That's not quite flipped, but that can reduce the stress on the presenter. But I think with virtual conferences, when it's sitting at your computer all day long, or even multiple hours a day over multiple days, it can be a little bit draining. But the more that you can maybe extend the content consumption part in advance, and then make that virtual conference about engaging, asking questions, having small group discussions, I think that's what's going to be really valuable. Because if you ask anyone, and myself included, that's what we miss most about the in-person experiences, is having those dinners, going out to happy hour, and having those lunch conversations, the conversations in the hallway with a cup of coffee in between the sessions. That's where we develop new relationships, learn from each other, and oftentimes that is as value, if not sometimes more valuable than the presentations themselves. So I think that flipped classroom model is something to really, really look at. If not for all your presentations, maybe just for some of them. And that's something that we're talking about for ours. I use mostly Zoom meetings, and I usually have 30 to 50 people. Would Zoom webinars be better? So this is really interesting. I have tried both. I think for most people, Zoom meetings are perfectly appropriate, particularly for this scale. For 100, 200 plus, I think Zoom webinars can be a little bit easier to manage because you have more features to be able to control it, to really make sure people are just seeing you or you and your guest, or like you in a panel versus seeing everyone. Zoom webinars has a little bit more Q&A features, similar to what I was talking about with Crowdcast, but not quite as robust. The one thing you lose in Zoom webinars, though, is that breakout group function. And so if you're talking 30 to 50 people, you can create, 10, 20 breakout groups of small groups of people. And so that's why I personally continue to prefer Zoom meetings over the webinars, and have never chosen webinars for myself or any of the presentations that I'm doing. It mostly just gives a little bit more control with larger crowds. GoToMeeting is more of a lighter weight version of GoToWebinar, more for on the fly, but you certainly can use it for shared screen meetings, just like you can use regular Zoom for that. And I believe Google Meets is really similar as well. It's more for on the fly. Regular Zoom meetings, in addition to Zoom webinars, have a registration feature if you want to have that in advance. However, Zoom meetings doesn't send, I believe they don't send any reminders, or maybe you don't have any control over when those reminders are sent or what they say. I do not recall. Whereas Zoom webinars have a lot more functionality over sending those reminders. And it just really depends on what type of system you want to have. You could have it as simple as you have, an email list. We use MailChimp for ours. There's a ton of services. You send it to everyone. You remind it to everyone, and then whoever shows up to the Zoom link that you sent. You don't have to have a registration system, but sometimes it can be helpful, particularly if you're in a grant funded situation where you want to know how many people registered and how many people attended. What is the best way to set up registration if a fee is charged? Do you have them pay through your website and then send them a link to register through the webinar application? So this is going to be so variable, particularly because I know that if you're in really any kind of organization, bureaucracy that's more than a few people, you usually have a way that your shop does things, particularly when it comes to local, state, federal government. They have a way that things need to be done. So you may not have a lot of options. You may need to have a payment system that has to go through a certain part of their website, and then you send them the webinar registration link. There is a tool called Zapier, though, and of course there's lots of more technical programming ways to connect those, but you can connect a payment to a webinar registration without requiring someone to do 2 steps. Sometimes that's something that you can set up. Sometimes that you may need someone more techie to set it up depending on that payment system that you're using. I did look up, and GoToWebinar can be set up with Stripe, which are credit card payments, and Zoom webinars can be paid through PayPal. So if that gives you some additional options as well to be able to charge directly in your webinar platform. How do you get people to register? And after they register, how do you make sure they show up? Okay, so we've already talked about some of this. You get people to register by telling as many people as possible about the webinar in multiple locations and telling them repeatedly. You know, we went through the Black Friday season and it's still holiday sales. So I don't know about you, but my email inbox is just overloaded and chaotic, and it's hard to find the real stuff because all I'm getting is, you know, email announcements about sales and promotions. And so because of all the clutter that people get in their email inboxes, it's important to be repetitive. And even if it feels like you're saying it too much, you're probably not saying it too much when it comes to your audience. So tell them again, get other people to tell them. Anytime you can have a partner share the information, that expands your reach and also increases trust of your organization when someone they trust is talking about it. After they register, this is where I think it is valuable to have some sort of registration system, even if it's just an email list, because you can send them reminders. The webinar is in a week. The webinar is in tomorrow. The webinar starts in an hour. GoToWebinar does this automatically, and I like that you don't have to really, you can adjust it, but you don't have to manually send those messages. But regardless of how functionally you do it, sending reminders is so important for getting folks to show up, because most often they're not keeping that link that was sent a week ago. They're waiting for that email to come right before, and that's what they're going to click to join in. Should you use a webcam for yourself? What about the participants? I think it depends on the size of the presentation. It also depends on your comfort level. I think it's okay not to, but certain topics, I would say the smaller the group, the more likely you want to have your webcam and your participants' webcam on together, so you can be learning together to build that comfort level and that trust of instructor and student, and also peer-to-peer. So smaller the group, I would encourage more webcams. I think it also just helps to personalize the presentation. I don't have a webcam today. My webcam was not stolen, but taken to another office a couple months ago, so I couldn't use one today. But yeah, I think if you're willing to do it, then go ahead and do it. I think it only can add to the situation. All right, what do you do for webinar reporting relating to the provision of a summary report to the agency funding the webinar? So we download reports after every webinar. That's part of kind of our follow-up process, because we want to make sure also that we download all those email addresses of folks that registered, and then so that we add them to our MailChimp email account so that they will start getting future information from us. Because oftentimes it's, you know, one of those partners or on social media where someone found a webinar and they registered with us for the first time. We want to make sure that they stay in our universe. So we download those, and then, you know, we do quarterly reports, and we just kind of gather some of that information. I guess it's really depending on what you've promised and what you're asking for. But so I would say that my best advice is to make sure that whatever tool that you're using provide you with the stats that you need. So that's why it's important to maybe test things out and do some research into their documentation of what stats are provided, because it may or may not be enough, and it may influence the tool that you choose to go with. All right, this is my information as well as Katie's, and I think we have a bunch of questions that have come in, so I will move that over here. You can continue to ask questions as we go, and Katie will continue to add those. All right. Take a drink here. Do you worry about people getting to the landing page and then not clicking on the registration link? I feel like you lose people with every click they need to make. Yes, I would say that is sometimes true. Having the landing page on your website definitely helps the people that are navigating your website, but we talked about earlier that tends not to be the bulk of people. What I will tend to do is when I'm promoting webinars, 2 weeks, multiple months in advance, I will send them to that landing page so they get the full meal deal of information. And then the closer it gets to the webinar, I will then send directly to the registration link. I will do this if I'm trying to sell something as well. I will send them to all the information at the beginning, and at the very end, I'm selling to the place where they can to make their commitment to either join a free thing or pay for a thing. So I would, I think you can use both, but there is a value in organizational branding for having that landing page as well. Now you can sometimes add branding to those GoToWebinar pages, and if it allows you to add more information, sometimes that can be fine, but you do have a valid point, and I think there's a way of combining both together. Oh, the website I spelled was pexels.com. I also like unsplash.com. You can also search, is I spell Flickr, for Creative Commons license. Yeah, Pexels and Unsplash I use all the time for stock images. I will tell you they're not so handy for water, wastewater, public health images, but if you need something more generic, it can be really handy, especially things that are more related to just trying to capture the audience attention, like question marks or kind of more graphical images. There's a lot on there. We've been asked a lot about making kind of a library for our audience, and it's something that we've explored because we have gathered a lot over the years. And if anybody has a great solution for displaying that, I'd love to hear that. Glenn mentions Pixabay as well. That's another good example. I believe a lot of the Pixabay images are either on Pexel or Unsplash. I did see some of those yesterday. Do you have a recommendation on time limits? If you need a longer period, like 2 hours, would you recommend a schedule for 2.5 hours and having breaks? I would say anything over an hour and a half, you should schedule a break. That really seems to be like our kind of time limit. We do a 4-hour webinar, and I believe there's just one break in there. Katie, can you let me know somewhere if there's 1 or 2 breaks? Maybe you can type it in the question thing for our 4-hour webinar. But yeah, I think you have to give time for folks to have a brain break, biology break, whatever they need. And to make it casual, maybe you have breaks and go into breakout rooms so folks can have a little kind of coffee hour, or just not even go into breakout rooms, just open it up and have a break and let people just have some chit chat together. Anything you can do to just make it more like real life can be helpful as well. Is there anything special we should try to do to engage a group of attendees? Sometimes we have 2, 3, or 4 in the same room watching one presentation together. Of course, we don't know if they're all paying attention. Okay, so first of all, I want to commend you because I think this is a really awesome model. Whether you're kind of forcing them to be there or not, sometimes it's, for private webinars, we've had folks host our webinars in a conference room somewhere. So maybe someone doesn't have great internet at their house. They can come and gather together, of course, in pre-pandemic times to watch a webinar. But let's just say it's even, colleagues in an office. I think this is where the handouts can really help. If a presentation has a handout, or you are delivering a handout, encouraging to print a handout for every attendee. That can really be helpful. You can also, if maybe you're like the local host for a webinar, you could kind of be the facilitator to ask some of these more personal questions and to maybe even get those attendees to share additional questions. Maybe they don't feel comfortable submitting them, but if you can get some conversation going, maybe in the breaks, you can get those submitted as questions from your group. So just really trying to be a moderator or host within that, or maybe you're not there. Maybe you're kind of designating one. Ask someone, okay, who's the foreman here of the group, and they're going to be in charge of submitting questions and encouraging them to make sure the small group is chatting with each other. Student decorum while attending. I think it's important to set expectations. When we are on a Zoom presentation, I will let everyone know, like, hey, I'm muting everyone, but you're adults, you have the option of unmuting yourselves. This helps when you have excess, home, child, family, dog, microwave noises. I think this is dramatically improving, and if we're talking about decades in the future, I'm seeing my daughter on Zoom, and she has the best Zoom decorum of anyone I've ever seen, and all of her friends do as well. So I think this next generation of those who are doing virtual school now will have learned all of those etiquette rules and be much better than some adults are these days. How do you deal with extremely data heavy or technical issues? I mean, are you talking about like high powered computing or streaming videos? I'll just say a couple things that I know. I've been surprised that our home internet, we have good internet, but we were able to actually, 3 of us be on 3 different Zoom meetings at once. So Zoom itself doesn't take much. My daughter's teacher streams videos all the time and they come through, so that has surprised me as well. So I think these platforms and these companies are developing the infrastructure to be able to compress the information and then basically expand it on your end to be able to see it without issues. I'm not totally sure what you're asking, but if you want to elaborate more, we can follow up on that. What about GoToTraining? How does that compare to the other platforms? I've never used GoToTraining, so I don't really know. It is part of that GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar family. I would assume it maybe has some more interactive features like whiteboarding, and GoToWebinar has a little bit of that. I believe I can take this little pen here and draw a little thing for you guys. I'm not really good with drawing my mouse though. So it has some limited features, but I imagine GoToTraining has the ability of collaborative whiteboarding, which we tend to do just right here in Google Docs like this, because you can even, I'm stuck on this head here, baseball drawings. There we go. In Google Docs, they have whiteboards and you can bring people in and allow them to share things. So even if your platform doesn't allow for that, using free tools like Google Docs allows you to build those in, basically making a more robust training platform with a combination of tools. Ooh, how do you keep the experts interested while teaching the novices when breakouts aren't practical? Okay, so here's what you do is you want to make sure those experts have an opportunity to share their opinion. So by asking for examples. During the presentation, I asked for examples of other platforms that you've used. So anything that you can share to allow those experts to anything that you can maybe invite or offer or open up to allow those experts to share their expertise, I think can keep them engaged. Just even sharing examples of the craziest thing that's happened to you. Again, people like to talk about themselves, and the more you can give them that chance to do that, the more they're going to stay connected to your presentation. The tech question was related to presentations with heavy mathematical or engineering content. You know, I would love to hear if there's any other experts on this webinar that have any recommendations of this. Put it in the chat box. I think this is a good example here because I don't have experience in teaching that content myself. I'd say you want to have multiple examples. I think that's where breakout rooms can help. I think that's where handouts can help if everyone's going to be kind of working through scenarios, or, you know, I think more like a traditional classroom type environment where you're not just spitting out, here's why or here's how. We have to go through examples of how do you implement this? How do you do the calculations? And so that often requires, you know, scenarios on paper. So I think taking more of the college professor approach, slowing it down a little bit, is what's going to be really valuable versus the fire hose of here's everything you need to know and good luck remembering it. No, we need to take time and practice this so that you can actually use this in your job. All right. Anything else? Lots of questions. Okay. Well, again, you can find me. I'm still stuck on the pen. There we go. Nope. Normal non-drawing mode. There we go. Sorry about it. I don't typically draw with GoToWebinar. So here is my contact information if you want to reach out further as well. And if you did need a certificate, I will actually go back to that GoToWebinar so we can have that information there for you. If you need a certificate, you have additional questions or comments, you can email us at info@wateroperator.org. And no matter where you registered, whether you came for us from private loan class or water operator, that's where we will get you your certificate for this presentation. And thank you guys so much for being a lovely audience, asking lots of great questions, sharing of your experiences. I particularly loved the worst thing that happened to you in a webinar part. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.